April 25, 2014, a city official in Flint, Michigan, flips a ceremonial switch. Clean water from Detroit stops flowing. The Flint River takes over. Cheers, photographs, applause. Nobody in that room mentions the number on the ledger that made this moment inevitable. Nobody says the word bankruptcy. Not once. Not in that room. We think cities run dry because of droughts, burst pipes, or engineering failures. We think water crises are natural disasters. They are not. They are financial disasters wearing rust and lead as a costume. The city didn't run out of water. The city ran out of money. And when a city runs out of money, the water is the first thing that starts lying to you. This is the story of how the balance sheet determines who drinks and who doesn't. It is the story of how insolvency becomes a public health catastrophe. The ledger has always decided who survives the 72 hours. Not the general, not the governor, the accountant. For most of the 20th century, American cities were monuments to industrial confidence. Detroit was the arsenal of democracy. Its water system, first constructed in 1827, grew into one of the largest water authorities on Earth. By the 1960s, the Great Lakes Water Authority served millions of people with treated water, gleaming treatment plants, hundreds of miles of pressurized pipe. Engineers called it a modern infrastructure miracle. Flint, Michigan was a jewel inside that system. A city of 100,000 people built on the back of General Motors. Factory wages funded municipal bonds. Those bonds funded pipes, pumps, and treatment plants. At its post-war peak, Flint had one of the highest per capita incomes in the United States. The streets were maintained. The parks were full. The tax base was strong. Every pipe was funded. Every pump had a budget. The infrastructure breathed easily, but beneath the surface the foundation was already rotting. The rot started in the 1970s and accelerated through the 1980s. General Motors began leaving Flint. Plant closures bled jobs from the city like a severed artery. By 1990, the population had dropped by nearly a third. Every family that left took their property taxes and income taxes with them. 30 years of hemorrhaging revenue. 30 years of deferred maintenance. 30 years of choosing the short-term budget over the long-term pipe. Here is the trap that nobody in city government ever explains. Water infrastructure doesn't die when the money stops. It dies slowly over decades while unpaid maintenance bills accumulate silently in spreadsheets. The pipes cast in the 1920s don't announce their failure. They corrode invisibly beneath the streets you walk on. The debt doesn't scream. It whispers. And by the time that whisper becomes a roar, the system has already crossed the point of no return. Detroit itself, the parent water authority supplying Flint, was running its own financial horror story. The city owed $18 billion in total obligations by 2013. $18 billion. Think about the scale of that. That figure exceeds the gross domestic product of more than 60 nations. On July 18, 2013, Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy protection. It became the largest municipal bankruptcy in United States history. The ledger had consumed the city. Michigan Public Act 436, the emergency manager. Law gave a state-appointed manager absolute financial authority over Flint. Elected officials lost all power overnight. Governor Rick Snyder appointed Darnell Earley as Flint's emergency manager in September 2013. The emergency manager examined Flint's water budget. $12 million per year paid to Detroit. That was the bleeding artery on the spreadsheet. Cut it. Switch to the Flint River. The decision wasn't made by engineers or public health officials. It was made by someone whose only success metric was a budget line item. That single choice would cost $1 billion to repair. April 25, 2014. The switch is flipped. Flint River water enters pipes built generations earlier. Nobody asks the critical question: what happens when corrosive river water flows through lead-lined pipes untreated? Nobody purchases the corrosion inhibitor that would have prevented lead leaching. That inhibitor cost $100 per day. $100 per day. Let that number sit in your mind, because what followed cost $1 billion to partially fix. Within weeks, residents notice brown water at their taps. Then it smells. Then it tastes metallic and sharp. The city issues boil water advisories in August 2014 after E. coli tests returned positive. In October 2014, General Motors stops using Flint's water in its engine plant. The water was corroding their machinery. Let that land. The water was too corrosive for an engine block. It was still being pumped into the bodies of 100,000 people. The Flint River water was 19 times more corrosive than Detroit's treated supply. Those 18,000 aging lead service lines beneath the city began leaching heavy metal directly into every glass and every bath. Lead has no safe level inside a human body. In children, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and causes permanent neurological damage. It reduces IQ permanently. It triggers behavioral disorders. It is a tax levied not in dollars, but in cognitive capacity, and it compounds with every sip. Internal emails showed that Michigan Department of Environmental Quality staff dismissed public health concerns to protect the official narrative. One official wrote in July 2015 that there was no legitimate evidence of a lead problem in Flint's water. It was a lie, written to protect a balance sheet. Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha published her peer-reviewed research in September 2015. The data was unambiguous. Blood lead levels in Flint children had doubled citywide. In some zip codes they had tripled. The state attacked her methodology. They questioned her credibility. They were not protecting public health. They were protecting the financial decision already made. Admitting the crisis meant admitting liability. Liability meant a number on the balance sheet the state could not afford. So the ledger was protected by silence. The pipes kept corroding. The children kept drinking. The children paid the deficit. The smoking gun sits in emails dated October 2015, later subpoenaed by congressional investigators. Senior officials inside Governor Snyder's administration had clear knowledge of the lead problem. They knew months before any public emergency was declared. In the most damning exchange, a senior aide writes, "We need to act to protect the most vulnerable." The action that followed was not pipe replacement. It was media strategy. This moment is a foreclosure. This is the liquidation sale. Michigan, operating Flint in emergency financial mode, had reclassified resident health as a contingent liability, not a moral obligation, a line item under current liabilities. The managers decided not to pay it. Solvency was chosen. Sovereignty was surrendered. When government can no longer afford to protect you from its own decisions, it has already defaulted on its most fundamental bond. And understand this economic logic is ancient. This is the mechanism that has ended cities for 3,000 years. The Romans built the ancient world's greatest water network, 11 aqueducts, 260 miles of channels supplying 1 million people in the capital alone. When the Western Roman Empire's financial machinery collapsed in the 4th and 5th centuries, the aqueducts fell silent first. The engineering was still sound, the treasury was empty, cities dried to villages within a generation. London in 1854 repeated the same calculation. 4 cholera epidemics had already killed 14,000 people. Parliament still refused to fund a comprehensive sewer system. The upfront cost was deemed excessive. Joseph Bazalgette received approval for his sewer network only in 1858. The trigger was the Great Stink, the Thames so putrid that parliamentary business in Westminster became impossible. The construction cost was £4.6 million. The cost of inaction was a multiple of that. The ledger moved, but only when the stench of insolvency reached the desks of the people controlling the money. That is the eternal formula. Suffering waits. Funding moves only when the powerful feel the cost. Bolivia's Cochabamba in the year 2000 shows the same trap from a different angle. The World Bank extended Bolivia a $600 million loan with a covenant attached. Privatized the city's water system. Bechtel Corporation received the contract. Within months of assuming control, Bechtel raised water prices by 200%. The average daily wage was approximately $2. Monthly water bills jumped to $20. Families on minimum wage allocated 20% of total income to water. The city didn't run out of water. The city ran out of citizens who could survive the financial terms attached to it. Sovereignty is solvency. The moment any government can no longer fund the delivery of safe water, it ceases to be sovereign at the biological level. Flint's residents discovered this in 2014. Cochabamba's residents discovered it in 2000. Jackson, Mississippi's residents discovered it in 22. The state's largest city had accumulated a $2 billion infrastructure deficit. It had been building for decades, dollar by unpaid dollar. Water mains broke 200 times per year in a city of 150,000 people. In August 2022, heavy rainfall overwhelmed the O.B. Curtis water treatment plant. 180,000 people lost safe water pressure for weeks. The National Guard delivered bottled water. The governor declared a disaster emergency. A city surrounded by one of the continent's most abundant freshwater regions was thirsting, because the money to move the water through aging pipes was gone. Think carefully about that equation. Jackson sits above vast underground water reserves. Water itself is not the scarcity. The maintenance budget is the scarcity. The infrastructure bond capacity is the scarcity. The political will to fund repairs is the scarcity. When the money disappears, water disappears. Even when it sits 200 feet beneath your feet, the ledger decides. Geography is irrelevant. Cape Town, South Africa confronted the same reckoning in 2018. Municipal officials announced Day Zero. April 12, 2018. They would shut off all household taps. 4 million residents would collect rationed water from 200 distribution points. The infrastructure investment shortfall had been documented and known for years. The gap. $1.2 billion needed, never allocated. 3 years of drought was the match that struck. But the fuel was a decade of underfunded maintenance and deferred capital spending. The drought didn't fail Cape Town. The budget did. Day zero was narrowly avoided through extreme rationing, but the financial diagnosis was exposed for the world to see. A wealthy city and a modern democratic state had nearly run completely dry because the books were mismanaged for a decade. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives U.S. drinking water infrastructure a grade of C-. The investment gap over the next 25 years, $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Right now, 240,000 water main breaks occur in the United States every single year. The average American water pipe is 47 years old. In many older cities, cast iron mains from the Woodrow Wilson era are still in active service. They are corroding from the inside. One freeze-thaw cycle separates them from catastrophic failure. Nobody is talking about this as a financial emergency, but that is exactly what it is. This is not a future warning. This is a present tense financial emergency without a name. Municipal bond markets are straining under pension obligations, declining tax bases, and post-COVID fiscal pressure. The cities that will lose water first are already identifiable. Look for the worst credit ratings and highest infrastructure deficits. The longest histories of population loss. Not hydrology. Accounting. In 2021, Michigan reached a $450 million settlement with Flint residents, the largest environmental justice settlement in American history. $450 million to compensate for a decision made to save $5 million per year. That is a 90-to-1 loss ratio on one financial decision. For every dollar saved by switching the water source, the state owed $90 in damages. No investor in history would have approved that trade, but emergency managers with budget targets and zero accountability to residents made it anyway. The lead damage cannot be reversed. No dollar amount repairs a developing nervous system. No settlement restores IQ points lost during critical neurological windows. A generation of Flint children will carry this biological debt for life. It cannot be securitized. It cannot be refinanced. It cannot be written off. The damage is permanent, compounding, and generational. Flint's lead service line replacement was not completed until 2021, 7 years after the crisis began. 7 years of emergency bottled water, filter distributions, blood testing, and legal proceedings. Total cost of remediation, response, and settlement, more than $1 billion. $1 billion to repair the consequences of refusing a $100 per day maintenance line item. That arithmetic is not just a scandal. It is the operating manual for civilizational financial failure. Newark, New Jersey confirmed the pattern in 2019, spending $120 million replacing lead service lines after its own contamination crisis. Pittsburgh's Water Authority carries $2.6 billion in deferred infrastructure needs with no clear funding solution. Baltimore loses 30% of treated water through leaking mains before it reaches a single tap. England privatized its water system in 1989 under Prime Minister Thatcher. Between 1989 and 2023, private water companies extracted £72 billion in dividends. They accumulated £60 billion in debt. Victorian-era infrastructure was left to decay. By 2024, raw sewage was discharged into British rivers more than 300,000 times in a single year. The pipes were bleeding, the dividends were flowing, the water was not. Here is the lesson every civilization learns and every generation forgets. Water is not a public good in any practical sense. Water is a public accounting problem. The infrastructure carrying clean water from source to tap is built on borrowed money. It is maintained on budget allocations. It is sustained by the fiscal health of whoever is legally responsible. When that entity is financially healthy, the water flows. When it is under strain, the water turns yellow. When it is insolvent, the water turns brown. When it declares bankruptcy, the water stops. The 72 hours without water is not a natural disaster timeline. It is a financial timeline. It is the interval between the moment a city's maintenance budget hits zero and the moment emergency funding arrives. It is the gap between insolvency and intervention, measured not in gallons but in dollars, debt covenants, and institutional slowness. The cities that survive infrastructure collapse are not the ones with the best geography or most rainfall. They are the ones with the cleanest balance sheets and highest municipal credit ratings. They are the ones with the political will to prioritize pipe replacement over tax cuts. The difference between Flint and a city that keeps its water clean is not virtue or engineering genius. It is a budget line that either got funded or didn't. Rome's aqueducts fell silent, not because the engineering failed. The treasury ran dry. London built its sewers not from compassion, but from cold financial logic. Cholera cost more than concrete. Bolivia's water war was not a revolution. It was a debt covenant pricing the poor out of survival. And Flint was not a government failure. It was the logical endpoint of municipal bankruptcy applied to infrastructure where failure means poison. The gold is gone. The credit is frozen. The water has turned. The ledger always decides. The balance sheet always determines who survives. The 72-hour clock that starts when your tap runs dry is not a countdown to dehydration. It is the gap between fiscal failure and physical death.